Hello everyone, this is Quester to Know, and today we will answer the question of what is philosophy from various perspectives. Before we proceed, I would like to explain how my PowerPoint is structured. At the start of every topic, there will be a text that helps us to understand the context of the topic. Then, I will give a brief explanation of the text itself, which will be further developed using more arguments and citations from different authors. How should we answer the question? We all know that philosophy is a really complex subject. In fact, the term itself is ambiguous, so much we use it without knowing its actual definition. So, in order to find answer, we will start to look at how Jean-Pierre Vernat answers similar question. Here we have a text from Jean-Pierre Vernat. It is encouraged to pause the video and read the text for a minute or two and answer the question. To answer the question, where does philosophy start? Jean-Pierre Vernat asks two new questions. Question of identity and question of origin. Note that these questions are inseparable because we cannot answer one without also answering the other. In an attempt to understand what philosophy is, we need to ask ourselves the same questions like what is philosophy, when, where, why, and how was it born. Thus, we will attempt to give the different possible meanings of philosophy, and in the next video we will talk about the question of origin. The question of identity. We are restating the question what is philosophy. But first we should understand that to define something is to identify its limits, to give a meaning, whereas philosophy seems to refuse an absolute definition and finite boundaries, as throughout its history there had been various and even contradictory definitions from philosophers. This makes an unanimity around its meaning impossible, though we could nevertheless consider some general conceptions, starting with its etymology. Philosophy as the love of wisdom. In its etymological meaning, philosophy is composed of two Grecian words, philia, love, and sophia, wisdom. So, philosophy means love of wisdom. First, I want to shed some light on this origin of the term. The story follows that of Pythagoras who lived in Samos. Back then, in Samos, if someone wanted answer on anything, he or she will reach out to Pythagoras if they were not able to find anything. Pythagoras always came up with answers that satisfied people, which brought them to call him the wisest, as in all-knowing. But Pythagoras refused it and said that he is a lover of wisdom, and only the gods are wise, and as such came the word philosophy. Please take a moment to read the text and answer the question. As it is emphasized in this text, the philosopher is in between the attitude of ignorant, who believes that he knows whereas he doesn't, and the one of the gods, who already have the totality of knowledge so do not need to look for it. And these three people are the actors. So philosophy means love of wisdom. But what is love? The philosopher Helvetius answer, to love it is to have a need. Since its beginning, philosophy had been the notice of a need, a lack we must satisfy. In this sense, it appears as our thirst for knowledge, our longing to reduce our ignorance through the use of reasoning. The activity of philosophizing is based on a constant search of knowledge, which is why Carl Jasper stated, to philosophize is to be on the way. This comparison is symbolic, as it portrays the philosopher as an eternal pilgrim towards knowledge. Thus, to be a philosopher is to have the humility to acknowledge that we do not know, and to be perpetually in search of knowing what we ignore. That is why Socrates said that, all that I know is that I know nothing. And it is this awareness that led him to the quest for knowledge. Take a moment to read the text and answer the question. From the text, we can understand that wisdom is not only comprised of knowledge but also soft skills. So there is a theoretical and practical side of philosophy, and both are necessary to be considered a philosopher. For example, we all know that theft is forbidden. This is our theoretical knowledge. If we don't decide to steal, then we are practicing what we know. If we decide to steal, then not only are we not practicing it, but we are also running the risk of getting caught, which will lead to misfortune. From all these, we could say that for the Greeks, knowledge is imperfect when it is not applied in our daily life, when it is not reflected from our attitudes and habits. That is why, in another sense, wisdom has to encourage positive human actions within an environment. Then, in this case, wisdom is constituted of both knowledge and virtue. This double meaning appears in Descartes' statement where he said that by wisdom is meant not only prudence in our everyday affairs, but also a perfect knowledge of all things that mankind is capable of knowing, both for the conduct of life and for the preservation of his health, and the discovery of all manners of skills. The merit of this affirmation is to combine the possibility of understanding reality and the necessity to complete it with the practice of virtue. Wisdom, then, becomes an attitude that, in the case of knowledge, distances us from ignorance, and in the case of action, distances us from overweening ambitions. We could understand that it is knowledge that leads us to virtue, and ignorance leads us to wrongdoing and misfortune, as Socrates stated. No one does wrong willingly. To summarize, philosophy, defined as the love of wisdom, is on one hand the art of thinking, and on the other hand the art of living. Now we will move on to philosophy as the knowledge of totality. To start off this idea, take a moment to read the text. Here, in this diagram, we could see that philosophy has a general object or focus, which is the reality. The reality, as he said, encompasses everything from concrete to abstract. That is why most of the philosophers in the past were into many fields at the same time. For example, Descartes was a mathematician, a scientist, and a philosopher. And the method of philosophy is reason. So the focus of philosophy is everything with its reason as its method. This is different from science, which focuses on a specific limited object. Here, for example, we have physics. In this case, everything not related to physics, such as biology or sociology, are not part of physics and is outside the expertise of physicists. The methods here depend on the object. In the case of physics, we will have to use, for example, the scientific method, which will be different from another science such as history. Philosophy therefore nourished the ambition to embrace the totality of reality. This conception had a long journey before being shaken gradually by the emancipation of science, which, according to Jean-Toussaint Desanti, the Cartesian tree became a forest. As Jean Piaget said, philosophy has purposes such as the totality of the real, of the exterior reality, as well as of the mind and its interrelations. In the antiquity, philosophy was represented as a form of total wisdom. It used to contain all knowledge which hasn't yet broken out from it. For Aristotle, the philosopher is someone who possesses the entirety of wisdom as far as possible. This supposes that the philosopher should not therefore ignore any form of knowledge, and should even nourish the ambition to acquire the maximum possible of it. Thus, philosophy can be described as a general approach affecting all areas of human existence. What Roger Caratini confirms when he affirms that philosophy is a reflection of the totality of being, as well as on man and his destiny, as on science and the universe, on the history of humanity, on the creation of the poet, the painter, or the musician. Its claim is encyclopedic. This concern to make philosophy a total knowledge is also expressed by Descartes, who defines it as a tree whose roots are metaphysics, the trunk is physics, and the branches which come out of the trunk are all the other sciences, which can be reduced to three main ones, namely medicine, mechanics, and ethics. But during the Enlightenment in Europe, the famous Cartesian tree became a forest. It should be noted that this event constituted a very serious blow to philosophy, which has the obligation to redefine itself. This is how it takes on a new face, that of critical reflection. So now we will talk about philosophy as critical reflection. Take a moment to read the text. In this text, world means general opinion, which includes opinions, accepted beliefs, knowledge, and prejudices. The word tyrant refers to the one who deprives people of their freedom, which is paramount for philosophy. The word preacher refers to the one who encourages submission, obedience, belief of dogma. It is good to specify that it is not a question of criticizing for the simple pleasure of criticizing, but it is rather a positive criticism. That is to say, an important step in the path which leads to the truth. Critical thinking is therefore the engine of philosophy. This is the position of Martin Towa, who said, in philosophy, no data, no idea, as venerable as it is admissible before being passed to critical thinking. Far from being a dogmatic knowledge, unanimously defined, philosophy is an activity of questioning, reason why the philosopher is always armed with critical mind. Unlike the non-philosopher who naively accepts without asking questions, the philosopher submits all customs and tradition to a critical examination, which lead toward to say that philosophy begins only with the decision to subject the philosophical and cultural heritage to criticism without complacency. The Cameroonian philosopher has the merit of emphasizing that the purpose of philosophy is to correct false certainties, illusions, and mistakes of common sense and of philosophy itself, a way of saying that in philosophy nothing should resist criticism. That is why Descartes recommends that we doubt everything in order to break from our ignorance. Philosophy therefore offers us the possibility of going beyond appearances, prejudices, spontaneous and dogmatic attitudes. Thus, the deeper meaning of philosophical thought lies in the questioning. Therefore, we understand perfectly Jaspers, who said that the questions of philosophy are more essential than the answers, and each answer becomes a new question. At this rate, philosophy has an eternal beginning, a perpetual questioning, to such an extent that unanimity would lead to the death of philosophical activity. But where did such a discipline come from? This leads us to the question of origin, which will be talked about in the next video. Thank you for watching, and since this is a new channel, any feedback or comments will be appreciated. Bye bye.